You know, sometimes all it takes is a smell to bring back a whole world you thought was long gone. This morning, the nurse walked by my room carrying a little tray with a slice of apple pie, nothing fancy, just one of those prepackaged kinds. But Lord have mercy, the smell. That warm cinnamon and sugar hit me like a wave, and suddenly I wasn't sitting here in this quiet little room with its beige walls and plastic flowers. No, ma'am. I was back in my old kitchen. 1961. The sun spilling across the checkered linoleum, the window open just a crack to let in the breeze, and the sound of my youngest Logan out in the yard, chasing butterflies with a mason jar. It's funny, isn't it? You live a whole life, and then one scent, one tiny whiff can unravel the whole ball of yarn. And there I was, standing over the old oven, pulling out my homemade pie. I made it from scratch, like we did back then. None of this store-bought stuff. We didn't have much, but we made do with what we had. That's how we did it in those days. But I'll tell you what, that morning when I smelled that pie, I didn't just remember the kitchen. I remembered everything that came after. Things I don't talk about much. Things I've tucked away, like folded linens in a cedar chest. I guess what I'm trying to say is, there's a story I've kept close to my chest for a long, long time. Maybe too long. And lately, well, I've been thinking, maybe it's time I shared it. Not because I won't pity heavens, no, but because I think some of you might understand. And maybe some of you need to hear it. Back in my day, we raised our children with our hands, our backs, and our hearts. We didn't have books or blogs telling us how to do it. We just did our best. I always told my kids, live with your heart, not your wallet. And I meant it. I did everything for them, every scraped knee, every school play, every burnt casserole, every sleepless night waiting for Am to come home safe. I was there, always. And yet, here I am now, 8 months into this place. They say it's a home. Well, maybe it is. But it don't feel like the kind of home I spent my life building. That pie, it took me back to a time before all this. Before the loneliness, before the quiet halls and the smell of disinfectant. Back when my house smelled like soil and sugar, and my days were filled with little feet pattering across the floor and warm hugs at bedtime. Back when I was needed. You ever have a memory that just won't leave you be? That keeps tapping on your shoulder, whispering in your ear when you're trying to sleep. That's what this one's been doing. And maybe it's because I'm getting older, or maybe it's just the way time works, but it's been on my heart lately. Heavy. That night in 1961. I didn't know it then, but that night would change everything. It was the last time we were all together, truly together, before life took its turns, before people made choices that left me wondering if they ever really knew me at all. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to tell you the story. Piece by piece. It ain't always pretty, and Lord knows it ain't easy. But it's mine, and maybe, just maybe, it'll mean something to you too. Because sometimes, the things we don't say, the stories we bury, they're the ones that shape us the most. Now, if y'all are still with me, pour yourself a little tea or coffee, settle in, 'cause this ain't no 5-minute tale. No, sir, this is a life. And lives, well, they take time to tell. Back in my day, life moved slower. Not lazy, mind you, just slower, like honey dripping off a spoon. I was born in a little town you wouldn't find on most maps anymore. Just a cluster of dusty roads, red barns, and front porches where folks would sit after supper and wave at every car that passed, even if we didn't know who was in it. Because that's what you did. That's how we did it in those days. We lived in a 2-bedroom farmhouse with a creaky screen door that never quite latched right. Mama used to say the wind had more sense than that old door, always swinging open when it wasn't supposed to. We didn't have much. We didn't even have a pot to pee in, if I'm being honest. But Lord, we had love. And Logan. And work, oh, plenty of that. My brothers and I were up with the roosters, hauling water from the pump, helping Mama hang clothes, picking beans till our fingers turned green. My daddy, bless his soul, passed when I was just 9. War took him. Mama never spoke of it much, just folded his uniform real neat and kept it in the cedar chest by her bed. She never remarried. Said she'd already had her once in a lifetime. I suppose that stuck with me more than I realized. As a little girl, I used to dream under the old elm tree behind the house. I'd lay on my back and watch the clouds, making stories out of them. One looked like a horse, the next like a teacup. I used to think the world was full of good people. That the end kind would come back to you, like a boomerang. I truly believed, with all my young heart, that people always came back to the ones who loved them. I wasn't much older when I started helping Mama in the garden. That patch of dirt behind the house was more than a place for vegetables. It was sacred. We grew tomatoes, corn, carrots, and Lord, the potatoes. Rows and rows of them. Digging in that soil, feeling the cool earth in my hands, it gave me peace and purpose. There's something about growing things that teaches you patience and hope. I remember the day I planted my first potato row by myself. Mama stood behind me with her apron tied crooked and her hands on her hips, saying, "Now don't you forget, you plant 'em deep, but not too deep. Give 'em room to breathe." She could have been talking about life, really. I reckon she was. By the time I was 16, I knew how to cook a full supper, mend clothes, and can peaches like nobody's business. I was what folks would call a good girl. I didn't go out much. My world was family, chores, the garden, and Sunday service. I didn't mind. That was just the way things were back then. And then he came along. He was a friend of my cousin's home from the army. Not much older than me, but he carried himself like a man who'd seen too much, too soon. He had these kind eyes and a smile that could melt butter on a cold biscuit. We'd sit on the porch swing after supper and talk till the stars came out. He never rushed me, just listened, made me feel seen. I don't know if you believe in love at first sight, but I do, because I lived it. That love, it didn't last. He was called back just months later, and he never came home. Killed overseas. They sent a flag and a letter. I cried until my chest ached. I didn't date again for years. Didn't want to. My heart, well, it wasn't whole anymore. Still, I carried on. That's what we did. We kept going, 'cause we had to. For Mama, for the garden, for life. And maybe, just maybe, I thought one day I'd build something just as strong as what we had with someone else. I still believed in goodness, in people, in the idea that love could grow from the smallest seed if you just tended to it right. Funny, looking back now, I wonder if that little girl under the elm tree would have believed she'd end up here, telling her story to strangers over a slice of memory and an old smell of pie. But I guess that's where it all began. I remember the first time I saw him, like it was yesterday, not a lifetime ago. It was the end of summer, and the air had that heavy, sweet smell of ripe peaches and hot dust. Mama had sent me to the church social to help serve lemonade. I didn't want to go, truth be told. I had dirt under my fingernails from working in the garden all morning, and my good dress was hanging crooked from the clothesline, still damp. But she said, "Go on now, you need to be around people your own age, not just potato rows and chickens." So I went. He was standing by the hay bales near the old well, tall, quiet, hands in his pockets like he didn't quite know what to do with them. He wasn't like the other boys, loud and rough with their elbows and too slick smiles. No, he was still, like a lake before the wind touches it. I couldn't tell you what it was exactly, but Lord, my heart did something strange when our eyes met. Just for a second. I remember thinking, well now, that's new. He was a cousin of someone, just back from basic training. His name was James, not Jim, not Jimmy, just James. He spoke slow, like every word had weight. That night, we sat on the church steps long after the crowd went home. He asked me about the garden and listened like it was the most important story he'd ever heard. Nobody ever asked me about the garden before, not really. Not like that. I told him how I'd learned to read the soil by touch. How Mama said plants feel your mood through your hands. He just smiled and said, "Sounds like you've got magic in your fingertips." Lord have mercy, I blushed so hard I had to fan myself with my plate. After that, he'd come by now and then, not often, but when he did, he'd bring me something small, a pressed flower, a smooth rock, once even a poem he'd written in pencil on the back of a train ticket. Said he wasn't much of a writer, but he wanted to try. "For you," he said. Just like that. Simple. I wasn't used to that kind of tenderness. We grew up tough, didn't talk about feelings much. But James, he softened things. Like spring after a long winter. And then the letter came. I was hanging sheets on the line when Mama called me inside. She was holding an envelope, thick paper, government seal. My hands were still wet. I remember leaving a damp mark on the page. He was being deployed overseas. 2 weeks from that day, we sat under the elm tree that night, the one where I used to dream when I was little. He didn't say much, just held my hand real gentle, like it might break. I didn't cry, not yet. I just laid my head on his shoulder and memorized everything I could. The way he smelled like clean soap and wood smoke, the rhythm of his breath, the callus on his thumb from holding a rifle. Before he left, he gave me a locket, nothing fancy, just a little silver heart. Inside, he tucked a photo of us sitting on the porch swing. On the back, he scratched in, "Wait for me." And I did. I waited with every part of me. Wrote him letters, lit a candle every Sunday. Prayed in ways I never had before. I'd never known hope could ache so much. But the world doesn't always give back what it takes. Weeks turned into months. Then one morning, same postman, same dusty road, came the second letter. Folded crisp. Cold. "We regret to inform you." I didn't speak for 3 days. Just sat by the elm tree with the locket pressed to my chest. Mama brought me tea, but I couldn't swallow. I remember thinking, how can a heart break so quietly? There were no screams, no dramatics. Just silence. Heavy as stone. That moment, it changed me. I was still a girl, but I stopped being a child, and maybe that's where the rest of my story really begins. Right there, in the shadow of that elm tree, with a love I'd never forget, and a piece of my heart buried somewhere far from home. Life has a funny way of shifting under your feet just when you start to feel steady. After James was gone, I thought I'd never open my heart again, and for a good while I didn't. But time moves, whether you want it to or not. Eventually, I met a man who was kind in his own quiet way. We didn't have the fire I had with James, but we built a life. He worked long hours at the mill, I tended the garden, and raised our babies. We had 3, 2 boys and a girl. Oh, they were my sunshine. The house was small, but full of noise and muddy boots and stick drawings on the fridge. I cooked every day, scrubbed the same floor till it shined, patched hand-me-downs, and stayed up many a night with a feverish child against my chest. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And Lord knows, I was proud of the life we were building. But it didn't stay easy. It was the winter of '78. Cold came early that year, bitter and cruel. The pipes froze, and the roof started leaking. My husband, he got laid off from the mill. We had nothing but a couple dollars and canned tomatoes in the cellar. I remember opening the pantry and counting jars like they were gold bars. We made do, but it was hard. I had to pawn my Sunday brooch just to buy boots for the kids. And people started talking. I'd hear it at the store, whispered just low enough to sting. She should ask her family for help. What kind of mother lets her kids go hungry? I wanted to scream, to tell Em I was trying, that I was doing everything I could with blistered hands and an atching back. But I didn't. I held my head high, smiled polite, and walked right past Em. You see, back then, asking for help, it wasn't easy. It felt like admitting failure. And Lord knows, I already had enough shame rattling inside me. I remember nights sitting by the stove, rocking the baby with one hand and covering a drafty window with the other, wondering, am I enough for them? Is love really gonna be enough to carry us through? One night, I broke down. Quietly, of course. Couldn't let the kids see. I stood in the kitchen, hands still smelling of onions and lye soap, and just cried. No wailing, just tears falling like rain onto the cracked linoleum. I felt like I was drowning in silence. My husband, he didn't say much, never was a talker. But that night he came over, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, we'll get through this. We always do. And we did, but not without scars. That winter marked something. A shift, not just in the weather or the pantry shelves, but in me. I started carrying fear in places I didn't know existed. Fear of not being enough, of losing everything we'd built, of watching my babies go without. And maybe the hardest part was realizing I couldn't protect them from everything, no matter how hard I tried. There was a crack in the roof and a crack in me, and both were letting in cold I didn't know how to stop. That's when the question started settling in my bones, the one that would follow me for years. If I give them everything, what will be left of me? I didn't have the answer then. Still not sure I do now. But I kept going. That's what we did. We held it together with thread and prayer and stubbornness. And I told myself, someday they'll understand. Someday they'll see how hard I tried. Only, sometimes, someday never comes. I remember the way the light came through the kitchen window that morning, soft, almost golden. It was a Sunday. I'd just pulled a peach cobbler from the oven, and the house smelled like sugar and warm fruit. The table was already set, mismatched plates, my mama's old silverware, and that blue-checked tablecloth I always saved for special days. My youngest had promised to visit with the grandkids. Said they'd be there after church, no later than noon. I was wearing my Sunday apron, the one with the embroidered daisies, and humming some old hymn, I don't even remember which one. I was happy, tired but happy. You see, I lived for those days, when the house was full, and little feet ran across the floor, and someone always needed something from Grandma. That's when I felt alive. But noon came and went. 1 o'clock. Then 2. I checked the phone, no calls, no messages. I told myself, they must have gotten held up. But deep down, there was a quiet ache starting to stir. One I'd tried to hush for years. It was near 3 when the knock came. Not on the door, on the heart. My middle child, the one who always spoke plain and fast like ripping off a Band-Aid, walked in alone. No hugs, no grandkids, no cobbler eaten. Just a conversation I wasn't ready for. Mama, they said, we've been talking. It's not safe for you to live alone anymore. The falls, the forgetting things. It's time. Time? I remember the room went quiet. Not just outside, in me. Like everything had stopped. I looked at the old clock above the stove, and I swear to you, the second hand just paused. Right there. Like it couldn't move forward without my permission. But I couldn't speak. I just stood there, holding a towel in my hand, still warm from the cobbler dish. And in that one breath, I saw it all my life. Every diaper I'd changed, every sandwich I'd packed, every night I sat up waiting for them to come home from prom, from college, from God knows where. I saw their fevered brows, their broken hearts, their graduations, weddings, all of it, flashing before me like an old film reel. And then came the words that split me right down the middle. We found a place for you, Mama. It's nice. You'll have people, care, everything you need. I wanted to scream. Everything I need is right here, and none of you are in it anymore. But I didn't. I smiled. The kind of smile you wear at funerals. I nodded, said I understood. But Lord, inside I shuddered. It wasn't just a house they were taking me from. It was my life, my memories, my walls with pencil marks still showing how tall they were at 5 and 7 and 10. My garden, my porch swing, my quiet little place where I still whispered to James some nights when the world felt too heavy. I packed my life into 3 boxes and a suitcase that night. My hands shook the whole time. I held my blue check tablecloth like it was a baby. I didn't know what to take, what to leave, what part of me would still be me once I left that house. And the worst part? They thought they were doing the right thing. It's for the best. You'll be safer. You'll think of someday. But I didn't feel thankful. I felt left. And in that moment, I realized I'd raised them to fly, but forgot to ask them to look back. I'd given all my love away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to keep me tethered. And when they carried me out that door, I smiled, because that's what mamas do. But I left my heart sitting on that porch swing, next to the ghost of a boy who never came home. The first night I slept here, I couldn't sleep at all. The room was clean, too clean. No creaks in the floorboards, no whine through the cracks, no sound of the old fridge humming in the corner like a lullaby. Just silence, cold and straight-edged, like a hospital tray. I lay there under those stiff white sheets, staring at the ceiling, thinking, is this it now? They say people get used to things, and I suppose I have in some ways. I know which hallway creaks when the nurse comes round. I know the smell of the Tuesday meatloaf before it hits the tray. I know which chair by the window gets the best afternoon sun. But I don't know who I am here. Not really. Back in the house, I had purpose. I had things to tend to, floors to mop, soup to stir, socks to darn, memories to dust. I had routines that felt like little rituals. Here, they do things for you. They mean well. But I'll tell you what, when someone does everything for you, you start feeling like nothing. Mornings used to be my favorite. The house would slowly wake with birdsong and sunlight stretching across the floor. Now I wake to silence and the soft click of shoes on linoleum. Someone brings me pills in a little paper cup and says, "Good morning, sweetheart," like that makes it all okay. I smile. I always smile. That's the trick, you see. You smile so they don't ask. So they don't look too close and see the pieces missing. I've got a drawer full of photos in the nightstand. My babies, all grown now. Suits, houses, their own little ones. I look at their faces sometimes and wonder, do they still hear my voice in their heads when they're making a tough choice? Do they ever smell cinnamon and think of me? They visit sometimes. Not as much as they used to. Holidays mostly. Sometimes a birthday call if someone remembers. I don't blame them. Life moves fast now. Everything's quicker, louder, brighter. There's no room for slow stories or quiet old women. But Lord, it gets lonely. You start talking to things. The lamp, the TV, your own hands. I talk to James more than I care to admit. I know he's not really there, but sitting by the window, I sometimes feel him near. Like maybe he's just outside the frame, leaning against the wall, smiling like he used to. Some days I think about that garden, how I used to bury my hands in the earth and feel something alive beneath me. Here, there's no dirt, no roots, just tile and antiseptic and the distant buzz of the vending machine. I don't feel angry anymore. That burned out months ago. I just feel still. Not peaceful exactly. Not broken either. Just somewhere in between. Like a book someone left open on a bench, pages fluttering in the wind, waiting for someone to finish the story. I used to believe that love always came back. That people returned to the ones who raised them, who fed them, who gave them everything. But now, I don't know. Maybe they don't. Maybe love just changes its address and forgets to send a postcard. I'm not who I used to be. I don't move the same. I don't speak as quick. And some days I catch myself wondering if I've become invisible. But I get up each morning. I fold my blanket just right. I hum to myself when I water the little plant by my window, the one the nurse gave me, said it was low maintenance. I reckon that's me now too. Still here, still breathing, just waiting for the next knock on the door. You wouldn't think a thing so small could make a difference, but sometimes it's the smallest things that save us. It was just a plant, nothing special. A peace lily, they told me, given to me by a young nurse named Abby. She's new here, wears her hair in a high bun, and has this nervous laugh, like she's always 2 seconds from spilling her coffee. Sweet girl. One day, she came in holding a little pot with a white flower just peeking through and said, "I thought your room could use something green." At first, I didn't pay it much mind. I placed it by the window, where the light hits in the afternoon, and left it there. But the next morning, I found myself looking at it. Really looking. The soil looked a little dry, so I gave it a splash of water from my glass. Just a sip. And then the next day, I did it again. And again. Before I knew it, tending to that plant became part of my day. I started talking to it. Not in a crazy way, just little things. "How you feeling today, darling?" Or "Ain't that sun feel good?" I caught myself humming while I wiped its leaves with an old napkin, the way I used to with my begonias at home. It reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that I knew how to keep things alive. Funny how watering a plant made me feel like maybe, just maybe, there was still a bit of me left. The part that cared, that nurtured, that made things grow. One afternoon, I noticed a woman sitting by herself in the lounge. Ruth, I think her name is. She's quiet, always keeps her blanket pulled up real high. That day, she looked even more lost than usual. I sat beside her, didn't say much, just offered half of my cookie and said, "These are better with company." She smiled, the tiniest smile, and nodded. The next day, she brought a photo of her and her husband on their wedding day. She just handed it to me without saying a word. And we sat, looking at that photo, like two girls watching time move in reverse. That's how it started. A plant, a cookie, a photo. Now every Tuesday I sit with Ruth. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we just sit. I started writing little poems on scraps of paper and leaving them on trays in the dining hall. Nothing fancy, just a line or two. The sun don't need to shout to shine. Even cracked teacups can hold warm things. That sort of thing. Abby asked me one day, "Did you used to write?" I told her, "No, honey, I used to survive. This is new. It ain't much. I still miss my home. I still wake up sometimes reaching for things that aren't there. But I also wake up now wondering if Ruth's coming to breakfast, or if that new nurse ever figured out how to fix the coffee machine, or if the plant by the window's bloom will open just a little wider today. I reckon that's something, maybe even enough. I don't feel full again, not yet, but I don't feel empty either, and that's new. I think maybe life doesn't end all at once. Maybe it curls back like petals in the dark, and if you're lucky, real lucky, something soft and green starts growing right where the hurt was. And sometimes when I look at that little plant stretching toward the sun, I think, maybe I'm stretching too. I've got a drawer in my nightstand that I hadn't opened in months, maybe longer. It's the one with the little brass handle, the kind that sticks if you pull too fast. Inside, things I wasn't ready to face. A locket with James' photo. A birthday card from my youngest and signed. A receipt from the moving truck the day they brought me here. And one envelope, yellowed, still sealed, their signatures on the back. The consent form, they called it. For the transfer. For my own good. I kept it all. Not out of spite. Out of ache. You see, I thought if I held on to those things, I was holding on to parts of myself. The pieces they forgot. The pieces I was scared to lose. But a few nights ago, I sat here, the lamp flickering low, the plant by the window sleeping, quiet in its pot, and I felt something shift. Not loud, not sudden, just something soft, like a whisper on the edge of my thoughts. I reached for that drawer and opened it slow. I held that locket like it was breathing. I pressed it to my chest and whispered, "You can rest now." Not just to James. To myself, to the years I spent carrying everyone else's life on my shoulders, forgetting my own. Then I picked up that envelope. My hands didn't tremble this time. I looked at their names, my babies, written in quick, nervous strokes. I know they were scared. I know they thought they were protecting me. And Lord knows, I was angry. I was hurt in a way I didn't have words for. Still am, some days. But I sat there with that paper in my hands, and for the first time, I didn't feel like it was a wound. It was just paper, just a decision they made. Not who I am, not all I am. So I did something simple. I folded it, kissed it once, just once, and slid it into the trash bin by the bed. And just like that, I let it go. Not because it didn't matter, not because it didn't hurt, but because carrying it was keeping me from holding anything else. And I still got space in these old arms. Still got room in this heart. I sat there for a long while after that. Quiet. Empty in the best way. Like when the dishes are done, the lights are low, and the house is still, not because it's abandoned, but because it's finally at peace. I thought about all the years I spent trying to be everything for everyone. The meals, the birthdays, the tears I wiped without ever letting my own fall. And I thought, maybe it's okay now. Maybe I don't need to be their whole world anymore. Maybe I get to be mine. I chose to live, not in the way I used to, chasing tasks and to-do lists, but gently, fully, with whatever time I've got left, whether it's a year or a week. I wake now not with regret, but with wonder. I notice the sky. I write my little poems. I smile at Ruth. I tend to my plant. I forgive over and over like prayer beads in my hands. I don't need an apology. I don't need the past to be different. I just need today. And today, I choose peace. I choose to live on, without blame, without bitterness, just on. You know, I used to think life was all about building a home, building a family, building a life worth remembering. And for a long time, I did just that. I scrubbed and stitched and stood strong, thinking if I just held everything together tight enough, nothing would slip through my fingers. But life, it slips anyway, like sand through the cracks, no matter how careful you are. These days, I spend more time remembering than doing. I sit by my little window, watching the light stretch across the floor, and I think about the years that used to rush by so loud with laughter, loud with slamming doors and screen doors banging in summer wind. Now it's quiet, still, but not empty. I've come to understand that not everything you give comes back to you the way you hoped. Sometimes You pour love into people like water into a cup, and they drink it up, carry it with them, and never look back to see if you're thirsty. But that doesn't mean it was wasted. Love, you see, is never lost. It just changes address. What I've learned, not from books, not from sermons, but from living, is that you don't get to choose how people carry you forward. You just get to choose whether or not you love, and anyway. And I do. Lord help me, I do. That's the thing about getting old. You stop needing to be right. You stop waiting for the I'm sorry or the thank you. You start finding peace in knowing you did your best, even if no one noticed at the time. I look back now and I see a girl under an elm tree, dreaming of love. I see a young mama hanging diapers in the sun. I see a woman with tired hands and a strong back who gave and gave and gave, thinking someday it would all come full circle. And here I am, not in the house I built, not surrounded by the voices I once held close, but still here. And here's the truth I've come to. You can spend your whole life waiting for someone to come back, waiting for recognition, waiting for a day that feels like enough. But maybe it's time to stop waiting. Maybe life isn't about what you get in return. Maybe it's about what you leave behind, in the way you loved, the way you listened, the way you showed up. You young folks might not understand it yet, but one day you'll look back and realize it wasn't the big moments that shaped you. It was the small ones, the quiet Tuesday mornings, the smile you gave a stranger, the time you stayed even when it wasn't easy. So, if you're listening now, if my voice is still with you, hear this. Don't wait for the world to give you permission to live. Don't wait for the right time to forgive, to speak up, to plant something new. Don't wait to be remembered. Just be worth remembering. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for you, too, to stop waiting. Well, if you've made it this far, bless your heart. I didn't expect anyone would want to sit with me this long. But here you are, still listening. And that means more than you know. I've told you my story, or at least the parts of it that still echo loud enough to make the walls of this little room feel a bit less empty. I've taken you back to my garden, my kitchen, that porch swing where a love once sat beside me. I've let you see the cracks, the heartbreaks, the quiet victories, and the lessons I had to learn the long, hard way. But I need you to know something. This story ain't just about the past. It's about now. It's about the moments that are still happening. Quiet, invisible moments in homes like yours and in hearts like mine. Because somewhere, right now, there's another woman sitting alone at her window. She might be waiting for a call that won't come, or folding laundry that no one will ever notice. She might be smiling while her heart breaks quietly inside her chest. And maybe, just maybe, she's hoping someone, anyone, will ask her about her life. So I'll ask you, when's the last time you called your mama? Not just to check a box or say a quick hello, I mean really called. Sat down, listened, heard the stories behind her eyes, heard her silences. Or maybe you're the mama, or the daughter, or the one who's always taking care of everybody else. If that's you, I see you. I really do. You know, folks talk a lot these days about leaving a legacy. But I think maybe legacy is not about the big things. Not money. Not names carved into stone. Maybe it's about whether someone remembers how your hands felt when they were small. Whether they recall your laugh in quiet moments. Whether they carry your kindness forward when you're no longer around to remind am. Sometimes I sit here and I wonder, do they remember? And sometimes I think they do. I like to believe they do. I still dream of James now and then. He don't speak in those dreams. He just sits beside me like he always did, real still, real steady. Sometimes we hold hands. Sometimes he looks out over the fields and nods, like he knows I made it through, even when it wasn't easy. And sometimes it feels like he remembers too, So, let me leave you with this. Do you believe love comes back? Do you believe the people we gave our hearts to, the ones we raised, the ones we lost, do you think they still carry pieces of us, even when they don't say it out loud? And maybe the harder question, what will you do when someone who once gave you everything needs just a little bit back? Think about that before the day's done, because one day it might be your story someone listens to. And wouldn't it be something if someone stayed long enough to hear it all the way through?